So, Mr. Olson, I recognize you for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the chairman of the full committee for his hospitality. And thank you, Chairman, for bringing H.R. 4273, the Resolving Environmental and Grid Reliability Conflicts Act of 2012, before this subcommittee. I also want to thank the witnesses for appearing here today to provide their input on this important piece of legislation, which removes electricity generators from the catch-22 of conflicting legal mandates that complicate electricity emergencies and threaten grid reliability. I introduced H.R. 4273 with bipartisan support. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Mr. Green and Mr. Doyle, for being original co-sponsors, to clarify Congress's intent that compliance with an emergency order issued by the Department of Energy should not be considered a violation of any federal, state, or local environmental laws or regulations. This common-sense legislation is extremely irrelevant today, as the Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and the Department of Energy and others have acknowledged that grid reliability could be threatened due to accelerated power plant closures. Secretary Chu, in this hearing room last month, expressed support for the concept of holding power generators harmless when they exceed emission limits when ordered to do so by the grid regulator. One of the safety valves in the toolbox is DOE's authority to mandate power generation and transmission under Section 202C of the Federal Power Act. It's no silver bullet, but it is a fallback in times of true emergency. However, as we hear from our witnesses today, 202C cannot work effectively unless Congress passes legislation like H.R. 4273 to resolve the potential conflict between the DOE mandate and environmental regulations. Absent legislative action, the risks and costs associated with temporary noncompliance with environmental requirements could prohibit a company from complying with the energy order, placing reliability in jeopardy. If my home state of Texas has another exceptionally hot summer like they did last summer, and the power is shut off, air conditioning goes off, lives will be at risk, particularly elderly and the young ones. In fact, last week, in my home city of Sugar Land, Texas, a young infant died in an automobile when the heat rose to 90 degrees. 90 degrees. We had 100-degree heat last summer. If that happens again and the grid goes down, people's lives will be at risk. This legislation has bipartisan support because it simply ensures a common-sense solution to protect grid reliability when it is most needed. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 4273 to protect grid reliability and provide certainty to electric providers. And, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to include records of support for my legislation from the American Public Power Association, the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, the Electric Power Supply Association, the Edison Electric Institute, the Industrial Energy Consumers of America, and the Midwest Power Coalition. Ask unanimous consent that these letters of support be inserted in the record.
Without objection.
Yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson.